Let's go on to some practical aspects of integrated reporting, Mike. Who is best placed in the company structure to actually be responsible for compiling the integrated report? Is it sustainability? Is it finance? Or is it risk department?
Actually, I think the answer is all of the above. One of the things about integrated reporting and the process of coming to grips of what it means to prepare an integrated report is the breaking down of silos. Now, certainly that comes from the top. The CEO is not going to sit down and write anything other than the CEO's letter, but he or she needs to convey that this is important. I think ultimately responsibility for the integrated report will reside in some department and amongst the integrated reporting companies. We see it at Novo Nordisk, for example, with a senior vice president of triple bottom line management. In other organizations, it's almost a shared responsibility between investor relations and the corporate sustainability department. In yet other organizations, the corporate responsibility or corporate sustainability department are taking the lead. Now, that said, I think there's a very critical role for the finance director to play in all of this. Some people would look at the finance director and say, well, what does he or she have to do with sustainability? But if you think about it in terms of the skill set of the finance director and frankly of the professional auditor, our skill is process and control. Unfortunately, the systems that gather non-financial or sustainability information are often not very robust. And the viewpoint and the insights of the finance director about how to build a robust system, about how to build a system that can, in fact, withstand assurance, that has proper controls over the data gathering and reporting process, I think is very critical. And at first glance could be overlooked, but I don't think companies should do that. I think the finance director has a critical role to play.
Because surely Michael's going to have a business brain to connect the financial performance to sustainability performance.
Well, that does lie at the core of what integrated reporting is all about. It's the ability to explain these relationships between non-financial or sustainability decisions and financial performance. This may be an arguable assertion, but some things that Bob Eccles and I have been told by investors is that one of the reasons that sustainability reports aren't often read is that there's no real in-depth discussion of how sustainability performance and financial performance are related. Again, that's another dimension that the finance director can help a company achieve, disclosing that relationship.
And of course, the company's board of directors has responsibility to look at sustainability issues and decide how that impacts on the strategy. Do you think the average board of directors has adequate skills to do that?
Well, I think intuitively they do. And one of the things that has been made very clear to me, especially over the last couple of days here in South Africa, is I've had the chance to participate with in discussions with some Grant Thornton clients. Some companies have actually been considering ESG factors in their decision making, but not doing it consciously. They make decisions about who they hire, about improving, say, a property, or providing little amenities like simply a covered stand where people can sit while waiting for a bus or a taxi. And these do have implications in terms of certain investments that were made that are driven by social needs. And yet, if you think of it, for example, in terms of a property, of a mall, the nicer you make the property, the more revenue that's going to be generated for the tenants. In having that specific discussion with someone, they didn't see it initially in terms of the relationship between the financial and the social implications. I think it's there, and that's what leads me to believe that boards of directors and the senior operations people in companies are actually thinking that way, but not necessarily consciously, and they're going to begin to connect it even better than they have.
But is there a misperception out there that this is just about CSR, and which is not? Integrated reporting is completely different.
CSR reporting is completely different. Again, going back to the earlier comment, some of the CSR reports just aren't necessarily referred to, whether it's by investors or even some of the NGO community, simply because the explanations, the discussions aren't very robust.
A crucial aspect of integrated reporting is ongoing stakeholder communication. What does ongoing mean? How often should you be engaging with your stakeholders and telling them about the company's strategy, performance, and activities?
That's actually a wonderful question, because I don't think you can begin to develop an integrated report until after you've had a dialogue with your stakeholders. And how frequent is that? I think it's important to view the world as very much changing. Not just reporting is changing, but the dynamics of stakeholder engagement will change. It's very easy to think of stakeholder engagement as a panel discussion or an investor meeting or a roundtable with NGOs. Well, when we think about it in the context of the internet, for example, how might we use social media to engage in a discussion with our stakeholders? There are companies that I'm aware of, Marks and Spencer in the UK, Timberland in the United States, who actually use social media to engage in dialogue with the broad stakeholder community on almost a continuous basis. And what that does for them, it gives them the ability to explain, for example, how a company might prove, or how does a company know that when they say all the produce in a grocery store is organic, how do they verify that? Now, what I'm getting at is that social media gives the company insight into the changing social values. So that helps them protect and mitigate their risks.
But when you're communicating with investors and the financial audience, you obviously still have to stick to stock exchange requirements.
Not only stock exchange requirements, but if I look at the United States, there are certain requirements, for example, by the Securities and Exchange Commission that limit the nature of the communications, and they have to be inclusive. So it's going to be interesting to watch it play out. And again, I want to go back to the internet, because I think stakeholder engagement and the internet are going to drive profound changes in transparency, in the way transparency is perceived, because of the differences in the way my generation uses information and a generation of 25 and 30-year-olds. A PDF report is for me. A roundtable is for me. That Facebook page or other internet media is for the 25-year-old generation who wants to consume and use the information somewhat differently than I do. And I think that's going to be a very exciting and profound change.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think companies should only be looking at what's happening in the Middle East and North Africa to see the power of the internet and Facebook. What is your advice to companies starting out on the integrated reporting journey?
My advice, particularly to the companies in South Africa who are certainly at the forefront of integrated reporting, and this is a bit repetitious, but I think it is worth repeating. Do not confuse the integrated report with the journey that's necessary to do integrated reporting. I would say keep in mind that there is no right and wrong, especially for the first couple of years. If I go back to the Novo Nordisk example, and this I think is very important for the companies in South Africa, as frankly around the world to listen to. When you look back at your first report 2 years from now or 5 years from now, you may scratch your head and just rhetorically ask, why did we do that? Well, you didn't do it because you were doing it wrong. You did it within the limitations of what you knew at that time. The stakeholder engagement process, the feedback that you'll get, what you'll learn as a company as you get a better understanding of the relationships between financial and non-financial performance are going to change the content of your report over time. So my takeaway would be that there is no right and wrong. And remember that this notion of integrated reporting is very much a journey rather than a point-in-time exercise.
And just briefly, your advice to directors of companies?
Be supportive. Be very supportive. I think the directors of companies, just by their language, they will have a strong role to play in the breaking down of traditional silos. They need to make it clear that integrated reporting is important. They need to communicate that this is a change in the corporation, in its values, in its very DNA. So they have a very strong role to play in making integrated reporting happen.
Yeah, Michael, on that positive note, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. This has been a pleasure.
And thank you so much for watching from Click to Start. I'll see you next time.